The following is a presentation of New Worker Radio. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily represent those of WZML, its staff, or management.
Hello, and welcome to New Worker News on WZML 92.9. My name is Manolis, bringing you national and international updates from a worker's perspective.
In today's 25th episode, we start with a series of international news. In recent weeks, numerous warships and fighter jets have been deployed to the Caribbean under the pretext of combating drug trafficking. Currently, approximately 1/7 of the U.S. Navy is stationed there, including its largest ship, the USS Gerald R. Ford. Pete Hegseth, confirming the continued policies of the Monroe Doctrine, affirmed the Western Hemisphere as America's so-called neighborhood, signaling Washington's intention to secure its position in a region where China has expanded their interests. The U.S. government has set its crosshairs on both Venezuela and Colombia, two countries which have deepened cooperation with Beijing and Russia. During their operations, U.S. forces have repeatedly attacked Venezuelan boats, allegedly carrying drug smugglers, and have killed dozens of people. In addition to drug operations, the U.S. is planning covert CIA missions and land attacks. The culmination of these military operations is what has been called Southern Spear. The deployment is now to be extended to the country Venezuela itself. U.S. President Donald Trump announced that it would begin, quote, very soon. Trump's recent statements are therefore nothing more than a further step in the ongoing escalation of military threats against Venezuela. During his first term, he openly called for a change of government in Caracas, and now the U.S. government seems prepared to use any means necessary to achieve this, knowingly accepting further escalation and an increasing risk of war. The Communist Workers' Platform of the USA recently signed a declaration by Communist and Workers' parties strongly condemning the U.S. military threat to Venezuela. It states, quote, "This new warmongering escalation of U.S. imperialism in the Caribbean clearly aims to enforce the interests of U.S. monopolies in competition with capital and the interests of rival powers, and to exert greater pressure on the government of Nicolás Maduro to continue granting greater privileges and concessions to U.S. monopoly capital, or even to bring about the complete collapse of the regime and the rise of the right-wing opposition faction to power as its loyal representatives. Furthermore, this would have been enormous destabilizing and violent repercussions for the entire Latin American and Caribbean region. The Communist Workers' Platform stands in solidarity with the Venezuelan people and the Latin American and Caribbean region. We reiterate, in solidarity, the words of the Communist Party of Venezuela, which is condemning the imperialist aggression of the U.S. as the increasing competition between China, Russia, and the U.S. for markets and resources. At the same time, the Communist Party of Venezuela is facing the repression of the anti-communist and anti-popular policies of the Maduro government. In other international news, the U.S. and Russia are brokering an imperialist peace plan. A possible plan for a ceasefire in the war between Ukraine and Russia has been circulating in international media. According to reports, it is based on a de facto division of Ukrainian territory, tough military restrictions on Ukraine, and extensive economic packages in which Western capital, in particular, is guaranteed a return on so-called reconstruction. The territorial part of the plan recognizes Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk as de facto Russian-controlled areas. For Kherson and Zaporizhia, a freeze is proposed along the current front line, while some zones are transformed into demilitarized buffer zones under Russian control. At the same time, both sides are obliged not to change the borders by military means. Militarily, the draft includes a limitation of the Ukrainian armed forces to 600,000 soldiers. NATO is to commit not to station troops in Ukraine, while fighter jets are instead placed in Poland. A special U.S.-Russian working group is established for security dialogue, and Russia is said to be legally bound to a policy of non-aggression towards Ukraine and Europe. The economic part is extensive and focuses on the reconstruction of Ukraine. The US and Europe are said to be launching large investment packages with $100 billion in frozen Russian assets being used for reconstruction, with 50% of the profits going to the US. The EU, for its part, is said to be adding another $100 billion. Other frozen Russian assets are to be used for joint US-Russian projects, while a special development fund for Ukraine is being created for investments in infrastructure, resources, and technology. The plan also includes the gradual lifting of sanctions against Russia, re-entry into the G8, and long-term economic cooperations between the United States and Russia. In the energy field, it is proposed that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant be put back into operation under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency, with electricity production divided equally between Ukraine and Russia, and that the United States help restore Ukraine's gas infrastructure. The draft states that the implementation will be based on a legally binding agreement overseen by a special peace council headed by Donald Trump, with sanctions as a tool against any violations. After signing, a ceasefire will take effect immediately and troops will be withdrawn to the agreed lines. Whether or not this plan becomes a reality, its content shows how the leading imperialist powers envision a so-called end to the war. That is, territory is de facto frozen, Ukraine is reduced to a militarily and economically limited stopgap, while the major imperialist blocs of power, the US, the EU, and on the other hand, Russia, negotiates over assets, energy flows, and future profits. For the working class in Ukraine and Russia, such a solution primarily means cementing the burdens and costs of the war on their backs, while control of the country's wealth remains in the hands of the competing capitalist centers. The fact that the US is being offered half the profits from reconstruction projects with frozen Russian assets makes it clear that this peace deal that is being promised is based on the logic of capital, that is, exploitation, privatization, and control over the region's economic resources. For the working class, this means no real security, but a continuation of the same imperialist order that caused the war in the first place. In more international news, the United States and Argentina have been negotiating a comprehensive so-called free trade agreement in which Buenos Aires is ready to grant Washington significant benefits in several key areas of the economy, according to a statement from the White House. Under the proposed agreement, Argentina will offer the United States tariff preferences in 7 strategic sectors: pharmaceuticals, chemicals, machinery, IT, medical technology, automotive, and agriculture. In return, the United States will provide benefits in only 2 areas: natural resources and medicines. In addition, Argentina commits to eliminating non-tariff barriers without requiring reciprocity, automatically recognizing U.S. certificates, standards, and technical regulations, even if they conflict with Argentinian norms. This means that U.S. products will have free passage, while Argentine industry will not receive the same relief. From January 2026, the government plans to abolish 1,000 regulations from the country's Institute of Viticulture, INV. All that remains is control of the final product, not production, not process, not safety. Critics say it opens up quality problems, import dominance, and the weakening of local small producers. Minister Augusto Costa warns that the agreement risks deepening Argentina's role as a commodity economy, weakening industry, and slowing technological development. The figures confirm the trend. 276,000 jobs have disappeared since Javier Milei took office. 30 companies are closing every day. Industrial employment has fallen by almost 3%. The number of employers has decreased by 4%. The biggest decline is seen in the public sector, construction, transport, and manufacturing. The White House has confirmed that it is working on the trade deal. Analysts see it as a part of a political transaction between the U.S. and the Milei administration. Washington is offering financial and diplomatic support in exchange for privatizations, market deregulations, weakening of state institutions, and more open markets for U.S. monopolies, increasing the exploitation of Argentinian workers by foreign capital. As a result, the domestic bourgeoisie of Argentina is tied more tightly to U.S. capital. Sovereignty is relinquished, and Argentina deepens its military alliances with the U.S., opening ground for the U.S. Army to establish a presence in the country and thus permitting U.S. interference. The proposed agreement illustrates how imperialism works in practice, through economic coercion, unilateral market opening, and political concessions. The U.S. receives tariff advantages in Argentina's most profitable sectors, while Argentina is reduced to a raw material exporter under American technological and legal domination. The Malay government project, hailed by the U.S. as a reform policy, in reality means mass unemployment, systemic deindustrialization, the dissolution of state protection systems, capital flight, and speculation. Just as in Latin America during previous liberal experiments, this means that the domestic bourgeoisie is more tightly tied to U.S. capital, while the working class pays the price in lost jobs, rising prices, and social devastation. What is happening in Argentina confirms a recurring truth. Without working class leadership and control over national development, every liberal reform is transformed into a new tool for imperialist domination. The workers of Argentina have the Argentine Communist Party, and through it, a way out. In national news, the U.S. authorities recorded a higher deficit of $284 billion in October amid a fiscal paralysis, in other words, the government shutdown, that ended after 43 days. In particular, the U.S. government deficit in October increased by $27 billion, a 10% increase compared to October 2024, mainly due to a shift of approximately $105 billion of November benefit spending for certain military and healthcare programs. Spending for October, including November benefit payments, totaled $689 billion, an 18% increase from $584 billion in October 2024. The total U.S. public debt currently stands at approximately $38.09 trillion, according to official data from the U.S. House of Representatives Economic Committee. The Trump administration is considering significant changes to subsidized healthcare programs under the Obamacare program, 1 month before the scheduled public subsidies expire on December 31st. President Trump himself, who has never hidden his opposition to Obamacare, told reporters that he is against a 2-year extension of subsidies, but did not rule out a short-term extension so that many insured people do not face significant premium increases. With these statements, he denied a report by Politico that his administration is planning a 2-year extension of Obamacare by adding new eligibility limits based on income criteria. However, U.S. citizens may face double the cost of health insurance in 2026, and many are likely to postpone signing anything in anticipation of a possible last-minute political agreement or to stop having insurance due to poverty. The confrontation with Democrats who sought to extend subsidies and tax breaks for health insurance exacerbated the confrontation between the two bourgeois blocs, the Democrats and the Republicans, and political polarization, leading to a government shutdown for 43 days from October 1st, which was temporarily ended by a bipartisan agreement until January 30th. In more national news, the various left-wing progressives, so-called communists, social democrats, and socialists in our country sang in unison that the Social Democrat mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, is the new great hope. But they were denied in his first meeting with the U.S. President Trump on the evening of November 21st. Mamdani arrived at the meeting ready for understanding and cooperation. Mamdani and Trump spoke of a convergence of goals, supposedly regarding the problems of New Yorkers who cannot bear the high cost of living. In statements made by Mamdani, he went so far as to praise the imperialist propaganda of the so-called peacemaker, the pacifist that is Trump. While when asked to comment on the 88 Democrats who voted on the same day for an anti-communist resolution in the House of Representatives, he responded that he himself is a, quote, democratic socialist and very open to it, emphasizing that what he cares about is not ideological differences, but getting work done for New York by a large majority. Amidst compliments, Trump explained that he has no problem continuing to call New York home with Mamdani as the mayor, and that he has no problem with the other Social Democrat Congressman Bernie Sanders, another so-called hope of Social Democrats everywhere, either emphasizing that he agrees with much more than anyone thinks. In the context of this slander of socialism-communism, Democrats and Republicans voted on a lousy anti-communist resolution. This anti-communist resolution, number 58 in the House of Representatives, was approved by 285 votes, 88 of which were Democrats. 98 voted against it and 2 abstained. The initiator of the resolution was the Republican Congresswoman Maria Salazar, a well-known television personality of the anti-Cuban mafia of Miami, with years of experience in producing anti-communist propaganda and slander. Among the well-known distortions, she reproduces the story of the famine in Ukraine in 1932-33, which was first launched by the Nazis. The bourgeois politicians declare that they so-called condemn socialism in all its forms, repudiate the implementation of socialist policies in the US, and that America will never embrace Marxism. The increased attack on the communists is part of a worldwide trend in which the bourgeoisie of all countries, in the context of an impending generalized imperialist conflict, must find a scapegoat for the indignation of the workers and the people. The ruling class fears that without criminalizing and attacking communists as the cause of our social problems, it will become the answer to which the working masses will finally find their solution.
You've been listening to New Worker News on 92.9 FM WZML, your home for local, national, and international news, all from a working class perspective. New Worker News is the official organ of the Communist Workers Platform. If you're a worker, we would like to hear from you. You can reach us at cwpusa@protonmail.com. Again, that's cwpusa@protonmail.com. If you would like more news from a worker's point of view, visit us at newworker.us. You can find weekly articles on events happening all over the country and internationally. If you've enjoyed the program and wish to see more working class reporting, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/New Worker. And thank you for listening to New Worker News on 92.9 FM WZML.